Sergeant Roberta Baskin has discovered that the government, the manufacturer, and the doctors apparently all knew about the potential danger. Only the patients were left screaming in the dark.
Geraldo, now it can be told that years after safer alternatives were available, Pantopec was still being used to do myelograms. It's left some patients feeling betrayed, and it may have left hundreds of thousands of patients with a legacy of pain.
It starts in your back and your lower back, and it goes all the way down into your legs. And it feels like your nerves are screaming because they hurt.
There's many times I've screamed. Many times my legs, the muscles will spasm and jerk. I have no control.
If you were burnt in a fire and you could never get rid of that burning feeling all the time, that's what it feels like.
These people blame their pain on the drug Pantopec. It's an oily dye that's injected around the spine to give doctors a clear picture on x-rays of any damaged area. For decades, Pantopec was the dye of choice. Approved by the Food and Drug Administration almost 50 years ago, it was praised for the sharp, crisp images it produced. But our investigation reveals there were questions about Pantopec's safety right from the start. Medical journals and case studies from around the world document the connection between Pantopec and an incurable scarring of the delicate spinal nerves called arachnoiditis. The evidence is substantial. Item 1948. Sweden bans oil-based dyes like Pantopec, calling them too toxic. Item 1962. An American medical quarterly reports severe arachnoiditis following myelograms. Item 1989. A warning from another respected medical journal that despite the clear connection between Pantopec and arachnoiditis, there are still physicians in the United States who persist in its use. Item 1991. An arachnoiditis victim in Florida commits suicide, leaving behind these words, "Please let me go to painless peace."
All right, go sit down in the living room.
Other victims, like Linda Graves, also find the pain unbearable. Linda now uses electric stimulation to cope with her pain, but there have been times when she felt she couldn't cope anymore.
I asked the doctor to cut the nerves, and they wouldn't do it. I said, would you, I said, just cut them, let's get it over with. I don't want to hurt anymore. They wouldn't do it.
Ironically, even the makers of Pantopec warn that occasional severe arachnoiditis occurs. But that warning is buried in the literature that doctors see. Patients don't.
Never was I ever informed that there is a danger with this fluid. Not now, not then.
Donald Dahlquist was a career Army man until a Jeep accident landed him in the hospital. 9 surgeries and 14 myelograms later, Dahlquist is in constant pain and losing the ability to walk even with braces. He now blames the Pantopec injected before each operation for his continued misery.
The civilian doctor says that we have to run a myelogram. At that time, on the table, the doctor said, "My God." He said, "This is like changing oil. They left all of the fluid in you." And this was the comment, "I've had my oil changed."
Pantopec does feel oily. Now, there's nothing in this product literature that suggests it's dangerous to touch, but there is a warning against its coming into contact with plastic and a strong recommendation to inject it using a glass syringe. We wanted to find out just how corrosive Pantopec can be. So we poured some in a plastic cup and waited. As this time-lapse photography shows, it didn't take long for it to start to disintegrate. And within 6 hours, the dye has eaten right through the bottom of the cup. How irritating is it to the spine?
Well, this is actually a fairly irritating substance, and so we used to have to try to remove as much of it as we can. And sometimes that could be difficult to try to get it all out.
The development of safer water-based dyes and other non-surgical tests like magnetic resonance should have made Pantopec obsolete years ago. But Judy Livengood was injected with Pantopec just last year and says doctors gave her no reason to be concerned.
The doctor said Pantopec dye is fine. You know, there's no side effects to it.
We asked the opinion of Dr. Ken Heithoff, a specialist in spine radiology. We have one case of a woman who had Pantopake dye injected just last year. What's your reaction to that?
My opinion is that Pantopake should not have been used at that time. I think the evidence that it caused arachnoiditis is clear.
Would you use Pantopake now?
Not in any circumstance.
Cervical lumbar spine repair guide for pre-scan information.
Diagnosing arachnoiditis can be difficult. Injury or surgery can also cause it. As a result, there are no hard figures on just how many people who've had Pantopake milligrams then develop this potentially crippling disease.
Hi, Mary Kay.
But Dr. Charles Burton, medical director at the Institute for Low Back Care in Minneapolis, estimates the victims number in the hundreds of thousands. In Mary Kay's case, there is no question that she has arachnoiditis today because of that Pantopake milligram that she had.
That's correct. Basically, she had back pain. She underwent 2 Pantopake milligrams. She never had surgery.
Texas-based Alcon Laboratories stopped making Pantopake in 1986, blaming falling sales. But a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, lost, appealed, then settled by Alcon, may have contributed to the decision to stop production. During the trial, damaging evidence was presented, revealing a failure to report adverse Pantopake reactions, including 2 deaths, to the FDA. For its part, the FDA still considers Pantopake a safe and approved drug. And with the government's blessing, Pantopake remained on the market until supplies expired just this past April.
What was really necessary was for someone to say, hey, wait a minute. I mean, this is really bad stuff. This is hurting people. There are people out there whose lives are being destroyed permanently because of this. That never happened. That was never there.
And whose job was it? Should the FDA have put out that warning?
I think it's all of our job. I think we failed.
You should know that for months we've attempted to get a representative of the Alcon company to agree to appear on this program in response to these very serious charges. They have consistently refused to do so without prior access to all our allegations and all our possible questions. So instead, they provided us with this lengthy and I think fairly threatening statement, which really bugs me, which concludes that the charges we are making are, quote, a discredit to a valuable diagnostic product which assisted millions of people for many years, end quote. On the other hand, ladies and gentlemen, if you think you or someone in your family has problems that might be related to this drug, you can send a self-addressed stamped envelope to the Arachnoiditis Information and Support Network. The address, Post Office Box 1166, Baldwin, Missouri 63022, the zip. We'll be right back with these stories. Roberta Baskin reported on the drug Pantopake and the problems it allegedly causes people who have been injected with it. The response to that story has frankly been overwhelming. Thousands of letters and phone calls have come in, most containing wrenching stories of indescribable pain. Here's Roberta Baskin with a follow-up to a report that has obviously struck a nerve.
Pantopake is a dye that is injected into the spine during a back X-ray called a myelogram. Millions of people have undergone this procedure. For decades, it was the only drug available to diagnose back problems. But even after safer alternatives were available, doctors continued using Pantopake for years because of its convenience. Unknown to patients, the dye can scar the nerves of the back, causing a painful disease called arachnoiditis. The connection was documented in the medical literature for decades. Even the drug's manufacturer eventually warned, occasional severe arachnoiditis occurs.
I hope we get a good response from the questionnaire because...
Since our special report aired, more than 5,000 back pain sufferers have written to this arachnoiditis support group in St. Louis. It's run by Cheryl Ahern, a victim herself, who spent $15,000 of her own money to start an informational network to help others.
I wouldn't wish this on anybody. I might wish a day or two of it on the people that made it so they'd know what it's like to have to live with this, but I wouldn't even wish this for a lifetime on them.
Joining us now live via satellite from Washington, our chief investigative correspondent Roberta Baskin, and here in our New York studio, a man named David Parker, a man who believes he has been suffering from Pantopake-caused arachnoiditis for more than 15 years. David, welcome. How do you feel right now? Why don't you describe what this condition does to you?
There's no escaping the pain of this arachnoiditis, which unfortunately so many thousands of people are experiencing. What I do to give myself some relief from the intense burning is I literally attach ice packs to my legs, to my shins for every waking hour. The doctors are not thrilled that I do that because it damages the skin, but it's all I can do to get myself some relief.
Did you see Roberta's report last week?
Yes, I did.
Did it help you at all?
Oh, it helped me a great deal. I mean, it helped me, and it helped many, many other people, I'm sure, because it's a very lonely type disease.
And people don't believe you, right?
Exactly.
Roberta, you know, aside from what David just said here, I have 3 of the 4,000 letters. How do you feel about this tremendous response to that report?
Well, it's a relief to me, you know, to hear from so many people, but there's also some real sad stories there. One of the ones that I received that I was shocked by is somebody who got a Pantopake myelogram, they say, last month.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's inexcusable.
Because this stuff was theoretically just going to be using the inventory up and no new stuff would be...
That's right.
David Parker, good luck.
Thank you, Geraldo. And we want to thank you very much for all of you for doing this.
If you feel you may have physical problems caused by this drug, you too can send a self-addressed stamped envelope to the Arachnoid-itis Information and Support Network, Post Office Box 1166, Baldwin, Missouri 63022. But also, you too should contact your doctor. Do that first. That's it.
Most of us have had it, and believe me, it is brutal. Today we have the story of a woman whose pain is not only in her back, but also in her heart. She says a chemical company caused her back condition, and nobody will help her. Here's Vanessa Moody.
Mama, people missing one. A simple request for most people, but for Cheryl Ahern, putting on her grandchild's shoes is just another painful reminder of the things she can't do anymore. It seems like something else is hurting her every day.
I'm in pain constantly. I take pain medication constantly. By constantly, I mean I take it every 4 to 6 hours every day. I can't pick anything up that weighs over 10 pounds. I'm not supposed to sit or stand for more than 30 minutes to an hour. I'm not supposed to bend over. I'm not supposed to climb stairs.
Cheryl suffers from arachnoiditis, scar tissue surrounding the nerves near her spine. There is no cure for it, and the pain never goes away. Cheryl's back problem started when she was working in a supermarket which no longer exists. She was working as a meat wrapper at the time. She reached up to pull a piece of paper from a 50-pound roll, and the entire roll of paper fell on her. In order to diagnose the problem, doctors in St. Louis recommended a myelogram, an X-ray of the spine. Surgery was performed and Cheryl's body began to heal. 3 years later, Cheryl was walking through a parking lot with her children. A pickup truck, unoccupied and out of control, ran into her. Cheryl ended up with yet another back injury, the need for another myelogram and more surgery.
The surgery was successful as far as getting me back to walking, but the arachnoid, they told me that was when they had told me that I had arachnoiditis, which I assumed was something caused by one of the 2 accidents that I had.
For 8 years, Cheryl would attribute the pain she felt to her 2 accidents, until one day she got a look at her medical records. For the first time, Cheryl learned that the dye injected into her spinal column during her myelograms may have caused the arachnoiditis. That dye is called Pantopake.
The first thought that I had was, this could have been prevented. I could have said no, and I wouldn't have been any worse off than I was, and I probably would have been a lot better off.
But she never got the chance to say no. Cheryl says even though she signed a consent form, no one ever explained that the dye called Pantopake, used in her myelograms, could cause the painful disease, arachnoiditis.
So we're going to be taking you down to have a myelogram done, and these are the papers you need to sign.
Cheryl contacted attorney Al Watkins to sue the manufacturer of Pantopake, but the court dismissed the case since it was filed after the 5-year statute of limitations. The court felt that Cheryl should have been able to discover the connection between Pantopake and her disease earlier, since it was well known in the medical community.
This decision holds that Cheryl Ahern is going to be responsible for all the medical knowledge in the world. She must go from healthcare provider to healthcare provider, disregard their advice until she finds out what the cause is, even though perhaps the healthcare providers themselves don't know.
I couldn't believe it. I I don't see where there's any justice in the decision that they handed down.
If they could just spend a day in my mother's life, if they could just see all the things that she doesn't get to do. I mean, if they had kids or if they had grandkids, they'd know what they really did to her. I can't say I hate them because I don't really know them, and I don't know that they know what they've done. But boy, I don't like them a lot. They really ruined my mom's life. Cheryl spends most of her time inside her house. Going out is difficult, but still possible. Something she and her family can't be so sure of in the future.
The doctors can't tell me how fast it's going to get worse and how bad it's going to get worse. But I have talked to people with the same disease that have had the same amount of myelograms that I've had that are completely immobile. They've been in wheelchairs for years.
I want her to be around to see my little girl grow up. And I want her to be around to see my little girl grow up, or little boy. And sometimes I'm afraid she's not going to be. And that scares me.
Well, since we first reported this story, the drug in question has been taken off the market in Britain and Sweden, but it is still available in the U.S., so beware. Next, life in the...
Painful illness to a diagnostic test. Channel 5's Kay Quinn reports.
Back in the early 70s, Cheryl Ahern underwent 3 myelograms after 2 accidents. During the back x-rays, she says doctors injected an iodine dye called Pantopake into her spine. Ahern says the dye caused scar tissue to form and a disease called arachnoiditis. Today, she lives in constant pain.
I did lose the feeling in my one leg. I had to learn how to walk again with that. The pain is still there. It gets worse all the time. It's moved up my spine, involved other organs.
Ahern says she's not the only patient with side effects from the dye. She has hundreds of letters from others across the country who claim to suffer the same kinds of illness.
It's just the end of life as you know it. You never know from one day to the other when you're going to be able to do something. You can't make promises to anybody 24 hours in advance.
Pantopake was banned in England in March of this year. It's been in use here in the U.S. for some 44 years. But doctors here say new technology has all but made the drug obsolete for use in back x-rays.
At the time, that was the state of the art, and there wasn't a better alternative. And in medicine, everything's always a calculated risk. If you're going to get more benefit from doing the test than from not doing the test, it's worth doing it.
The drug is still manufactured and now used in other diagnostic tests. Ahern says she wants it banned completely, but even that won't ease what she knows will be a lifetime of pain.
I'll never heal from the cure, which was the myelogram. It shows up on x-ray today, which has been 15, 16, 17 years later.
Patients' bodies, the dye is still on the market, and at least 2 area women blame their lifelong medical problems on it. Jim Hale reports.
Like thousands of others, Cheryl Ahern of Baldwin and Judy Chilcott of Chesterfield underwent myelogram examinations in the 1970s. Both had back problems and both received spinal injections of Pantopake, a dye used to enhance x-rays of the back.
When they injected the dye, I thought they had injected 1,000 or 1,000,000 fire ants in my back. The pain was excruciating. It was horrible, just horrible.
Both Cheryl and Judy now suffer from a long list of debilitating physical problems: limited use of arms and legs, incontinence, headaches, arachnoiditis, and pain, constant pain. Both blame Pantopake. The oil-based iodine dye is supposed to be removed from spinal cavities after the myelogram, but that's the problem.
The dye is still in my spine. If I went and had an x-ray today, it would show up as clearly as it did 15 years ago. I've talked to radiologists that have told me that they have done x-rays on people's backs that had it done 25 years ago, and it shows up just as clear. And removing it from your spinal fluid is equivalent to removing oil from water. Your spinal fluid would be the water.
Pantopeg is made by Alcon Incorporated in Puerto Rico, distributed by Lafayette Pharmacal of Texas. Officials would not discuss the dye with us. The FDA says Pantopeg, first approved in 1944, is little used anymore, but is listed as safe and effective. Not so in England. It was removed from use there in March in the wake of hundreds of lawsuits filed against the dye. Cheryl Ahern sued, but a Missouri court threw out her case based only on the statute of limitations. What would Cheryl and Judy say to the maker of Pantopeg and to those who might be injected with it?
I guess I'd want them to know what it feels like to be 28 years old, the mother of 2 small children, and find out that the life that I knew was over. Then it was only going to get worse. And now I'm 44 years old. I have grandchildren. I can't pick them up.
I would say to them, don't do it. It can ruin your life. It has mine.
I lost a baby because of this. My husband and I have separated twice. He's a wonderful man. There's only so much people can take.
Jim Hale, Channel 2 News.
With us today are 6 victims who claim their lives have been destroyed by the very drugs that were supposed to cure them. It's called Pantopeg. It's used in spinal exams. Cheryl has never been able to lift or hug her grandchild. She suffers from a crippling illness, which she says she got from being injected with this Pantopeg. Judy is also a Pantopeg victim. She tells us she is in pain 24 hours a day. Pain which only goes away when her body turns numb. She is unable to perform even simple household chores and is no longer able to hold a job. Now, Judy, your problem is the Pantopeg.
Right. Mine is not the tryptophan.
The drug that you, well, it's not a drug, it's like a dye, isn't it? That
yes.
they inject into your spine so they can take an x-ray or a picture of your spine for suspected injury.
That's right.
What happened as a result of the Pantopeg?
Well, I had a back problem in 1975 and had no back problems before that and didn't know what had happened. Went to the hospital and they did the normal procedures for back problems, and that was to basically do some testing and try to eliminate some problems, and then to put me in traction, give me some bed rest. When that did not work, about 6 weeks later, the advice was to have a back operation and to just see what was going on. A myelogram had been done, and the myelogram was done with Pantopeg, and at the time I knew nothing about it. I certainly trusted the doctors. I knew that I was in terrible, excruciating pain and that something would have to be done. And the surgery did, in fact, show that there was a ruptured disc, and so that problem was corrected with the surgery, and I went on about my life and really had no more problems. I was admitted to the hospital a couple of times after that, simply for some bed rest, for some traction, all, in my opinion, relating just to back problems. And most of the problems that I had, the doctor said that's just part of having a back problem, having had back surgery, learn to live with it. In 1981, I had a very similar type of pain that had occurred in 1975. I went back to the hospital, and the doctor said, you seem to have had a ruptured disc again. And I said, oh, I hope not. And he said, well, we'll have to put you in the hospital, run some tests, and see what happens. And
tell me, really, the bottom line right now is, what are your symptoms?
My symptoms now are excruciating pain all the time, but it's something that, quote, the doctor tells me to learn to live with. There's numbness in my legs, there's tingling in my legs, there's jumping in my back. I have the numbness. In my legs, I have extreme amount of tingling. It's there all the time. To look at me, you wouldn't know it, but I have it there all the time. It never goes away. It is something I've learned to live with.
Cheryl, your symptoms, I think you described them as hot solder dripping down your legs. Is that, I mean, a gruesome description? Is it really that bad?
That's what it feels like. It feels like somebody's constantly dripping boiling water. Something, that's the type of the way I describe it.
Is it worse that this injury you allege was caused by something that your doctor gave you rather than by God or nature?
It's 100 times worse. I didn't have to have this disease. I would have been cured from the problem they gave me the test for.
Scott Rosenblum, you're an attorney handling many of these Panapay cases. We have a statement from Alcon Labs. He is Cheryl's attorney, by the way. They say that this drug, Panapay, has been administered over the last 40 years to millions and millions of people, and that the incidence of the disease that both these ladies now allege was caused by the Panapay is less than 0.001%. 1,000th, or is that 100th? 1,000th of 1%. Can that be?
I'm sure that's a valid study, but I can also cite you to a study that I discussed earlier from a Dr. Geyer, who tested 50 patients that have symptoms similar to Cheryl, arachnoiditis, and of those 50 patients, 90% of them had been given a myelogram with the oil-based dye Panapay.
You feel then that there are many more cases than this fraction the company alleges?
One of the problems with the drug Panapay is its effects are insidious, and I think Cheryl would tell you that her condition didn't come on all at once. She was given these myelograms in the early 70s on 3 different occasions. Her condition deteriorated slowly to the extent where she is now today in a horrible condition.
Could I add something, Waldo?
Please.
They never told me they gave me the drug. They told me over a 15-year period that it was a chronic back syndrome. I found out by accident when they transported me from one hospital to another. The doctors kept telling me it was just my original back problem, which was minor.
I'm going to give you an address if you have taken this Panapay and claim symptoms similar to that from the 2 ladies we have just heard. So get a pencil, a piece of paper. It will be coming your way in 30 seconds. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Stay with us. For those people who are alleging some after effects or side effects or suspecting some from the drug Panapay, Cheryl is serving as the clearinghouse for your inquiries. Her address, incidentally, is, first of all, Cheryl Ahern, Post Office Box 1166, Baldwin, Missouri. There's 2 L's in Baldwin. The zip there, 63022. This, incidentally, is Cheryl's mom.
Hi. I just wanted to say that, and things that I have read, the drug company knew of the side effects that Panapay caused and never admitted it until after the statute of limitations ran out.
Joe Graydon, back in the Tar Heel State, any truth to that? Is it as awful as it sounds? Is the profit motive so insidious that they would withhold valuable, necessary data until the statute of limitations had expired and they could no longer be sued?
Geraldo, I can't speak specifically to the Panapay case, but I did go to the medical literature to see when the first problems with Panapay started showing up. And back in the late 70s, there is no doubt that there were case reports, and the drug was prescribed, continued to be prescribed into the 80s. I don't know if the company withheld information, but we have certainly had examples in more recent history where drug companies concerned about profits did keep some side effect information, shall we say, under their hats far longer than they should have. I think Oriflex is one example.
Dr. Rosenberg, can that be?
Yes, it could.
I mean, should we look at the drug companies now as adversaries? Should we use the same rule of caveat emptor that we use when we're buying a used car? Is it that self-serving?
There is, to a certain extent, a self-serving bias interest. I think it varies from company to company, and I think the Food and Drug Administration has to keep a very important role in maintaining the way these companies operate.
But are they, Joe? Or is the policeman asleep at the wheel here, mixing my metaphors?
Well, sometimes I think the FDA has let us all down because we count on the Food and Drug Administration to provide us enforcement to make sure that the medicines, both over-the-counter and prescription, are safe. But what most people don't realize is that safe is a relative term. We can't throw penicillin away just because some people are allergic to it and may die. Thousands may be saved. The real key is that people have to be better informed. And I think the Food and Drug Administration has really disappointed me and most other people who are aware of this, because the FDA does not help the consumer know enough about the prescribed medications that he or she is expected to take.
I want to talk much more about people being informed consumers as we go on in this broadcast, because I believe that that is key. You must ask your doctor, etc., what the potential side effects are, what the reported literature states on some of these drugs. Yeah. On this Panapake, this spinal fluid, this dye, everyone who had, what's the process called? A myelogram. That's like an X-ray of the spine?
Yes, it's...
And that's millions of people, right?
It was the most commonly used drug in a myelogram. If you have, since 1940.
If any of you have had a myelogram, then you've had, probably...
The Panapake.
The Panapake. So if you have the symptoms that have been described here, Cheryl incidentally has a lot of trouble walking. She had to be assisted up on the stage. She uses a cane. So just remember that. If you have some unexplained symptoms, this may be one of the reasons. Doctor, quickly, a closing statement. How can you protect yourself?
Well, I believe that basically the system is not perfect. It is becoming better and better as the years go on. I think that the consumer must be well informed. They must use their physician, their pharmacist, and other health resources, read information about the side effects of these medications from various types of material that is available to the public, and be very careful not to take things such as L-tryptophan that are available in health food stores on the advice of some untrained professional.
Or in my case, my buddy, the executive producer. Joe, you're a populist. Give us 30 seconds of advice. We're almost out of time. Go.
Drugs save lives, Geraldo. They cure us when we're ill, but they also can kill. And so you have to be suspicious. You have to know what the benefits are, what the risks are. Be informed. It's your only protection.
Let me just say that...